Right, this is question 2. You've got an exponential graph and you need to determine the equation of f. So we've got b to the x plus q, and we know that 0, 0 passes, or the graph passes through 0, 0, so we can substitute that into the equation. And then you know that anything to the power of 0 is 1, which makes q negative 1. So now we've got y equals b to the x minus 1. So now we need to solve for b. Is there another point that this curve passes through? Yes. We're going to substitute 2, 3. 3 goes into y's place, 2 goes into x's place, and I get b squared is 4. So b is plus or minus 2, but you should know that an exponential graph is not defined when the base is negative. So it's just b is 2. So therefore, f of x is 2 to the x minus 1. Write down the equation of the asymptote of f. The asymptote is always the same as the q, so y equals negative 1. Find the f of 1. That means find the y value when x is 1. So we substitute 1 into x's place, and we get 1. And then the range of f. Well, if you look here, remember the asymptote is there, it's going through negative 1, and there are no y values below that asymptote, there are only y values above the asymptote. So my range is y is greater than negative 1. If you choose to write in interval notation, then you would say y is an element from negative 1 to infinity. All right, part C, we now have to sketch the inverse on the same set of axes. So remember when you sketch the inverse, the x's and the y's swap around. So if your asymptote is y equals negative 1, your inverse's asymptote will be x is negative 1. So we need a vertical asymptote there, x is negative 1. If the curve passes through 2, 3, the inverse will pass through 3, 2. So we need to indicate that. And it will also pass through 0, 0, because when you swap 0, 0 around, you get the same thing. So then my exponential graph looks like that. And we've shown 2 other points. So we've shown 3, 2, and we've shown 0, 0, and the asymptote. Use the graph to determine for which values of x, f of x is less than the inverse. So you need to find where is the original below the inverse. So the original is below the inverse there. Okay, that point there is the point of intersection of the two graphs. It's 1, 1. So we can say then that x is between 0 and 1. It's this little section here, and we read off from the x. Okay, determine the equation of the inverse. So you know that the equation of the inverse of an exponential is a log. So we've got y equals 2 to the x minus 1. When we find an inverse, the x and the y swap around. So we get x is 2 to the y minus 1. We can't write it like that. We have to write it as y, the subject of the formula. So I'm going to add 1. I'll get 2 to the y. Then if I write it as y, the subject of the formula, y is the log of x plus 1 base 2. Remember, if 2 is the base of it in exponential form, 2 is the base of the log. And then you can replace that with f to the minus 1x is the log of x plus 1 base